The silence of space had never been so unsettling. Stars shimmered in the distance, cold and indifferent, as the void stretched endlessly in every direction. Yet here in the midst of it all, on the edge of a galaxy not too far from human territory, something monumental was happening. Captain Daniel Grimm Hayes stood on the bridge of the ISF Redemption, staring at the dark abyss before him. His hands gripped the railing as he muttered, "This ain't good." Not at all. His eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the holographic display hovering in front of him, showing the approaching anomaly that had been terrorizing the galactic sectors for weeks now. This was the kind of mess humans found themselves in more often than not. They weren't the biggest, fastest, or most advanced species in the Galactic Alliance. Hell, most alien species thought of them as reckless fools, good in a fight, but overall disposable. Too bad for the aliens, though. Humans never knew when to quit. "Grimm, we've got movement," Lieutenant Kara Voss called from her station. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. She was young, smart, and above all, fearless. It was exactly why she had earned her place at Grimm's side. She had a knack for keeping her cool when things were about to hit the fan. "What kind of movement?" Grimm asked, not taking his eyes off the hologram. She adjusted a few controls, her fingers moving quickly over the interface. "Looks like they're testing us, sir. Scans indicate minimal energy signatures, but we've seen this before. They're playing with us, seeing what we'll do, just like the last 3 times." Grimm grumbled. His jaw tightened, remembering how those previous encounters had ended. Always the same. An ambush, followed by desperate fighting, and more bodies floating out in the cold. He wasn't about to let that happen again. Not on his watch. Behind him, the rest of the bridge crew sat at their stations, each one tense but ready. They all knew what was coming. Ever since humanity had stumbled into the galactic stage, the universe had been relentless. War after war, conflict after conflict. The human race didn't get a warm welcome. Instead, it got a cosmic middle finger. And yet, despite every loss and every setback, humanity had learned, adapted, and above all, survived. "They're here," Kara said, her voice barely above a whisper now. The tension was thick enough to choke on. The display flickered as several small blips appeared on the screen. These were no ordinary ships. The Zydercon swarm was known for their ambush tactics, sending in waves of tiny, fast-moving ships that overwhelmed enemy defenses before the larger ships even showed themselves. Grimm sighed. "You'd think after all these years, they'd try something new." Kara grinned. "Guess even aliens get stuck in their ways." He nodded to her. "All right, Voss. Let's show these bastards what happens when they mess with humans." Without a moment's hesitation, Kara's hands danced across the controls, activating the ship's defense systems. Grimm could hear the low hum as the Redemption's weapons charged up. They weren't the most powerful ship in the fleet, but they had something most aliens didn't account for: grit. Pure human stubbornness, the kind that didn't let you die without taking a few of the enemy down with you. "Fire at will," Grimm ordered. A barrage of energy blasts shot out from the Redemption, slicing through the blackness of space like angry red lances. The first wave of Zydercon ships darted toward them, zigzagging in erratic patterns that made them nearly impossible to hit. Nearly. The Redemption's automated systems tracked the movement, predicting their erratic shifts. Several of the small ships exploded into fiery bursts of light as the human weapons found their mark. Grimm leaned forward, watching closely. The first wave was always the easiest. The real test came when the larger ships moved in. He knew it was only a matter of time. "They're retaliating," Kara said, her fingers moving rapidly across her console. The Zydercons were quick. They always were. But humans, as always, had learned. They had adapted, and Grimm had no intention of giving them the upper hand this time. The bridge shook violently as the first impacts hit. Shields flared, absorbing the brunt of the assault, but the force of the attack sent a shudder through the ship. "Keep it steady," Grimm barked. "We're not giving them a damn inch." The second wave of Zydercon ships moved in, this time faster and more aggressively. Their attacks were coordinated, weaving around the Redemption's defenses with deadly precision. Grimm's eyes narrowed. They were learning, but so were the humans. Kara, deploy countermeasures, Grimm ordered. With a nod, Kara activated a sequence of commands. Several drones shot out from the Redemption, emitting powerful electromagnetic pulses. The Zydrocon ships wobbled, their systems disrupted for just a moment. But it was enough. Human weapons tore through their ranks, turning more of the alien vessels into space dust. For a brief second, there was silence. Grimm felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they'd gotten through this one without too much damage. But then, the scanners beeped, louder this time. They're sending the big ones, Kara muttered, her face grim. Grimm's jaw clenched. Of course, they were. Prepare for heavy assault. On the display, 3 massive blips appeared, dwarfing the tiny ships that had come before. These were the Zydrocon cruisers, the backbone of their fleet. Each one bristled with weapons, capable of tearing smaller ships apart in seconds. Grimm wasn't about to let that happen. Target the lead ship. Full power to weapons. Let's make M regret, showing their faces. The Redemption's weapons hummed to life again, this time with a vengeance. Energy beams shot toward the massive cruiser, slamming into its shields with a satisfying crackle. The enemy ship returned fire, sending a volley of plasma shots back at the Redemption. The bridge shook violently, and alarms blared as the shields struggled to hold. Grimm's knuckles turned white as he gripped the railing. Hold it together, people. We're not done yet. Another volley of shots from the Redemption hit the cruiser, this time piercing its shields and tearing into the hull. Sparks flew from the alien ship as explosions rocked its core. Grimm allowed himself a small, grim smile. Looks like we just ruined their day, Kara said with a grin. But Grimm wasn't smiling. He knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Keep firing. We take them all down, or we die trying. The battle raged on, the Redemption pushing harder than ever, but Grimm could feel it in his bones. This was just the beginning. The galaxy had no idea what kind of storm was coming their way. Humans weren't just survivors. They were fighters. And when you push them too far, well, the universe was about to find out what hell really looked like. The Redemption hung in space, battered but defiant. Fires raged within the damaged sectors, alarms blaring as the engineering teams worked furiously to keep the ship operational. But the battle wasn't over. Far from it. The massive Zydrocon cruisers loomed ahead, their monstrous silhouettes cutting through the starry backdrop like a grim reminder that death was always one misstep away. Captain Grimm Hayes paced across the bridge, his mind racing through every option. He wasn't a man who liked retreat, but he wasn't stupid either. The odds were stacked against them. 3 enemy cruisers, all armed to the teeth. And here they were, one human ship on the edge of destruction. Typical. Shields at 27%, Captain, Lieutenant Caravas reported, her voice barely masking the tension. Grimm stopped pacing, his eyes scanning the bridge. The crew was focused, but he could see the exhaustion etched on their faces. Weeks of fighting, countless engagements, and no rest. It was the life of a soldier, but even soldiers had their limits. They couldn't hold on much longer if something didn't change. Right. We need to make a damn move before they tear us apart. Grimm turned to Kara. What's our ammo situation? Low, she replied, her hands moving over the controls. We've got enough for 1 concentrated burst, maybe 2 if we're lucky. After that, well, we better hope we can talk our way out of this one. Grimm snorted. Talking's never been our strong suit. Kara cracked a grin. No kidding, sir. The captain stared at the holographic display. The Zydrocon cruisers were regrouping, lining up for what would likely be their final push. The moment they coordinated their assault, the Redemption would be nothing more than a floating wreck. They had to act now. All right, people, Grimm barked, his voice snapping the crew back to full attention. We're gonna hit them where it hurts. We're gonna punch straight through their damn fleet and come out the other side, because that's what humans do. We don't run, we don't cower, and we sure as hell don't die quietly. The crew nodded in silent agreement. They heard this speech before. Grimm wasn't one for eloquent words, but he had a way of making even the most hopeless situations feel like they had a shot. And right now, that was all they needed, a shot. Target the center cruiser. We're going to hit it with everything we've got. If we can take out their leader, the others might lose coordination. It's a long shot, but long shots are all we've got left. Kara tapped a few commands into the console, and the targeting systems locked onto the massive Zydrocon cruiser ahead. It was a behemoth, towering over the Redemption like some ancient space leviathan. Its hull bristled with weapons, and its shields were still at near full strength. But humans had never let odds stop them before. "Weapons ready, Captain," Kara said. Grim nodded. "Fire." The ship lurched as every available cannon, laser, and missile launched at the cruiser. The barrage was blinding, a cascade of energy and firepower slamming into the Zydrocon shields. The alien cruiser's defenses flared up, struggling to absorb the onslaught. For a moment, it seemed like nothing could break through. Then, cracks began to appear in the shield, flickering as the energy overload overwhelmed the alien systems. "Keep firing," Grim shouted. His voice barely carried over the roar of the ship's weaponry. The Redemption's guns pounded away, punching through the weakening shields. Finally, with a deafening crack, the cruiser's defenses gave out, and the human weapons tore into its hull. Explosions erupted along the ship's surface, and for a brief, glorious second, it seemed like victory was within reach. Then, the counterattack came. The remaining Zydrocon ships opened fire, their cannons unleashing a torrent of plasma and energy that rocked the Redemption to its core. The bridge shook violently as sparks flew from overloaded consoles. Grim was thrown to the ground, the air knocked from his lungs as he struggled to regain his footing. "Shields are failing," Kara shouted, her voice laced with panic. Grim dragged himself up, gripping the railing for support. His eyes darted to the status displays. The ship was on the verge of collapse. They couldn't take another hit like that, but it didn't matter. They'd come too far to give up now. "Divert all power to forward weapons and engines," Grim ordered through gritted teeth. "We're going to ram the bastard if we have to." Kara hesitated for only a moment before complying. The lights on the bridge dimmed as power was rerouted to the weapons and engines. The Redemption surged forward, its battered hull groaning under the strain. The damaged Zydrocon cruiser ahead loomed closer, its crippled form still dangerous but vulnerable. "Sir, we'll be in firing range in 10 seconds, Kara said, her voice tense. Grim stared at the screen, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Let's make those 10 seconds count." The Redemption's remaining weapons powered up, ready for one final strike. But before they could fire, something unexpected happened. "Captain," one of the crewmen shouted, "we're detecting a massive energy signature from behind us." Grim whipped around to the rear displays, his eyes narrowing. "What the hell is that?" On the screen, a new ship appeared. No, several ships. Large, sleek, and unlike anything Grim had ever seen. Their designs were alien, but not Zydrocon. They were something else entirely, and they were fast. Faster than anything in the Zydrocon fleet. Within seconds, the new ships had closed the distance, and without warning, they opened fire on the Zydrocon cruisers. Beams of pure energy sliced through the alien ships like they were made of paper. The Zydrocons, caught completely off guard, tried to retaliate, but it was too late. The new attackers dismantled them with brutal efficiency, their weapons far more advanced than anything Grim had ever seen. The bridge fell silent as the last Zydrocon cruiser exploded in a brilliant burst of light, leaving the Redemption alone with its mysterious saviors. "What the hell just happened?" Kara muttered, her eyes wide in disbelief. Grim didn't answer. He was staring at the screen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. The new ships hovered in place, their sleek, predatory forms intimidating even at a distance. "Incoming transmission, Captain," the communications officer said, his voice shaky. Grim nodded. "Put it through." The screen flickered, and a face appeared. The figure was humanoid, but not human. Its skin was a deep shade of blue, with glowing lines running across its features. Its eyes were cold, calculating, and entirely too intelligent. "Captain Hayes of the human vessel Redemption," the figure said, its voice smooth but with an edge of authority. "You've wandered into dangerous territory. I suggest you explain yourselves." Grim straightened, brushing the dust from his uniform. "We didn't have much choice, pal. We were just trying not to get blown to pieces by the Zydracons." "Who the hell are you?" The figure's lips curled into something resembling a smile. "We are the Valarathi, and you, human, are about to learn the true power of this galaxy." Grim crossed his arms, narrowing his eyes. "Yeah, well, we humans have a tendency to learn the hard way. You'll find that out soon enough." The Valarathi leader's smile widened. "Oh, I'm counting on it." The transmission cut off, leaving Grim and the crew in a stunned silence. Whoever these Valarathi were, one thing was clear. Humanity had just made contact with something far more dangerous than the Zydracons. And once again, the universe was about to find out just how stubborn humans could be. The Bridge of the Redemption remained in silence as the screen went black, leaving only the faint hum of the ship's systems to fill the void. Grim stood still, his mind racing through the possibilities of what had just happened. The Valarathi, whoever the hell they were, had just wiped out the Zydracon threat like they were swatting flies. And now they had turned their attention to the humans. Karavos broke the silence first. "So, we've got new players in the game. What do you make of them, Captain?" Grim's lips tightened into a grimace. "They saved our asses, but I'm not about to start sending thank you notes just yet." Behind him, the communications officer, Petty Officer Martinez, looked up from his console. "Sir, do you think they're hostile? They didn't attack us, but they didn't seem too friendly either." Grim ran a hand over his stubbled chin. "Hostile, maybe. But what really worries me is how they just cut through those Zydracons like it was nothing. That kind of firepower could turn us into space dust if they felt like it." Kara leaned back in her chair, her fingers tapping lightly on her console. "So, what's the plan? We've got a crippled ship, a mysterious new threat, and no idea what we're up against. Do we engage or hightail it out of here?" Grim gave her a sideways glance. "If we had the fuel or firepower to run, maybe. But with the state the ship's in, I don't think we've got much of a choice. We'll see what these Valarathi want, but we play it smart. No one does anything until I say so." The bridge crew nodded, the tension palpable in the air. Grim turned back to the main viewport, his eyes fixed on the massive ships hovering in the distance. Whoever they were, the Valarathi clearly weren't just another galactic species looking to make friends. Their technology, their calm confidence, it all pointed to something much more dangerous than the humans had faced before. And that meant one thing: humanity was about to get in way over its head. Again, before Grim could give the order to open communications, the ship's computer beeped, indicating an incoming transmission. This time, it wasn't from the Valarathi. It was from Earth. "Captain Hayes, incoming priority message from the Terran High Command," Martinez called out, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "Patch it through," Grim said, his attention shifting to the new threat. The holographic display lit up once more, this time showing the face of Admiral Jaina Korvax, the head of Terran Fleet Command. Her gray hair was pulled back tightly, and her sharp blue eyes reflected years of battle-hardened experience. She was not someone to mince words. "Grim," Korvax said, without any preamble, "we've been monitoring your situation. The Valarathi have just made themselves known to us as well. You're not the only ones they've decided to drop in on." Grim raised an eyebrow. "You mean they've hit other human ships?" "Not just ships," Korvax replied, her tone serious. "They've hit entire colonies. 2 of our outer rim settlements went dark 3 hours ago. No distress signals, no survivors. The Valarathi moved in, and they wiped them out completely. We didn't even see them coming." The captain's gut tightened. This was worse than he'd thought. "And you're telling me this now? We didn't know what we were dealing with until they showed up in your sector. Now we know. They aren't here to negotiate. They're here to conquer." Grim clenched his fists. "What do you want us to do, Admirals?" "Survive," Korvax said bluntly. "Right now, Our priority is figuring out what the hell these Valarathi want and how we stop them. We're regrouping the fleet, but until we know more, every human ship out there is on its own. You'll need to hold out. Buy us some time." Grim smirked. Same old story. Humans thrown to the wolves while the higher-ups figure out how to save their own skin. Korvax's expression didn't change. "You're outnumbered, outgunned, and the enemy is unlike anything we've seen before. If you don't think you can handle it, Captain, I'll order you to pull back now. But I know you better than that." Grim's eyes narrowed. "We'll do our part. You just make sure the cavalry's coming." "It's coming, Grim. Just stay alive long enough for it to matter." Korvax out. The transmission ended as abruptly as it had started, leaving the crew with an uneasy silence. "So," Kara said after a long pause, "what's the plan now, sir?" Grim turned to face his crew, his voice low but firm. "We buy time, we gather intel, and we get ready for the fight of our lives. Those Valarathi think they can just stroll in and take what they want, but they're about to learn the hard way what happens when you back humans into a corner." The bridge crew shared a grim nod, knowing all too well what was coming next. It was the same story, time and time again. The galaxy threw everything it had at humanity, and humanity threw it right back. There was no running now. There never was. "All right, people, listen up," Grim continued. "First things first, we need to get this ship operational again. I want all non-essential power diverted to the engines and weapons. Patch up what we can, and prepare for immediate combat readiness. We don't know when those Valarathi might decide to come for us, but we sure as hell aren't going to be sitting ducks." Kara was already at her console, issuing orders to the engineering team. "Weapons are in bad shape, Captain. We can maybe get one of the main cannons operational, but the rest will be hit or miss. Then we make that one shot count," Grim said. "Martinez, see if you can get any more data on those Valarathi ships. I want to know what we're up against before we're neck-deep in it." "Aye, sir," Martinez replied, his fingers dancing over the controls as he pulled up the latest scans. "Their hull composition is unlike anything we've seen before. It's almost organic in nature. The material seems to absorb energy, making it difficult to penetrate with standard weapons. But there are faint signatures of something internal. It's like their ships have a heartbeat." Grim raised an eyebrow. "A heartbeat? You telling me these ships are alive?" Martinez shook his head. "Not exactly, sir. It's more like they're powered by something living. Whatever it is, it's damn powerful. And it might explain why they're so fast and responsive in battle." Grim frowned. Organic ships. Living power sources. The more he learned about the Valarathi, the worse it got. "Right. Well, if they bleed, they can die. Let's figure out how to make that happen." Before anyone could respond, the ship's proximity alarms blared to life. Kara's eyes widened as she looked at her console. "Captain, we've got incoming. It's the Valarathi. They're moving in fast." Grim slammed his fist on the railing. "How many?" "3 ships, sir," Kara replied, her voice tight. "Same size as the ones that took out the Zydrakon fleet." "Here we go again," Grim muttered under his breath. "All right, people, this is it. Get to battle stations. We hold them off for as long as we can. Remember, we're buying time for the fleet. Every second we stay in this fight is a second they can use to mount a counterattack." The crew moved quickly, their hands steady despite the fear gnawing at the edges of their minds. They'd been through hell before, but this was something new, something terrifying. But as long as they had breath in their lungs, they weren't going down without a fight. "Target the lead ship," Grim ordered as the Valarathi ships closed in. "Let's see if we can put a dent in them." Kara's fingers flew over the controls, locking onto the nearest Valarathi vessel. Cannons charged, ready to fire. Fire! The Redemption's remaining main cannon roared to life, a blinding beam of energy surging toward the alien ship. But as the blast hit the Valarathi shields, something strange happened. The energy dissipated, absorbed into the ship's hull as if it had never existed. "Captain, the shot did nothing," Kara exclaimed, her voice tinged with disbelief. Grim's jaw tightened. "Shit. All right, Plan B. Focus on evasive maneuvers. We need to stay mobile. Don't let them lock onto us." The ship lurched as the Valarathi returned fire, beams of energy slicing through space, narrowly missing the redemption. Grim gripped the railing as the ship twisted and turned, dodging the onslaught. "Captain, I don't know how long we can keep this up," Kara shouted over the chaos. Grim's mind raced. They were running out of options and fast, but there was one thing left they hadn't tried. A desperate, last-ditch move. "Prepare the warp drive," Grim ordered, his voice steady. Kara blinked in surprise. "Sir, we can't outrun them. The drive's barely operational, and if we try to jump in this condition..." "We're not running," Grim interrupted. "We're going straight at them, full speed. If we can't hit them from a distance, we'll ram the bastards head on. It's our only shot." The crew stared at him in stunned silence. It was a suicide move, but it was the only move they had left. "Do it," Grim barked. "Now." Kara nodded, her hands moving quickly over the controls. The ship's engines roared to life, the damaged warp drive powering up for one final, desperate push. "All hands, brace for impact," Grim shouted as the Redemption shot forward, hurtling toward the lead Valarathi ship at breakneck speed. The enemy vessel loomed larger and larger in the viewport, its sleek form glowing with the strange energy that powered it. Grim's heart pounded in his chest as the distance closed. This was it, all or nothing. And then, just before the collision, the Valarathi ship shimmered and disappeared. The Redemption shot through empty space, the enemy vessel gone as if it had never been there. "What the?" Kara gasped, her eyes wide with shock. Grim stared at the viewport, his mind reeling. The Valarathi had vanished. No trace, no debris, nothing. They just disappeared, Martinez whispered, his voice barely audible. Grim's fists clenched. "No, they didn't disappear. They're playing with us." And as the ship drifted through the empty void, Grim knew one thing for certain. The Valarathi were far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. And the real fight was just beginning. The void of space yawned wide in front of them, silent and oppressive. The Valarathi ships had vanished without a trace, leaving the Redemption floating in the vast emptiness, battered and confused. But Captain Grim, Hayes, had no time for confusion. His mind churned through the possibilities as his eyes stayed locked on the empty viewport. Kara Voss, still recovering from the sheer insanity of their failed ramming attempt, spoke up, her voice tinged with disbelief. "How the hell do you fight something that can just vanish?" Grim didn't answer right away. He stared at the holographic display, watching as the sensors reported nothing. No debris, no energy signatures, nothing. The Valarathi ships had disappeared as if they had never existed, but Grim knew better. They were still out there, waiting, watching. "We can't fight what we can't see," Grim muttered. "But that doesn't mean we're beaten. They're testing us, probing us, trying to figure out how we react. Well, they're in for a surprise." Kara raised an eyebrow, her expression one of cautious hope. "You got an idea?" Grim turned to face her, a grim smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We don't play their game. We don't wait around for them to pick us off like prey. We turn the tables. We hunt them." The bridge fell silent. Even in the face of overwhelming odds, Grim's crew had learned to trust his instincts. They had been through enough battles with him to know that he always had a plan, no matter how reckless it seemed. "Captain, we've still got barely functional systems here," Petty Officer Martinez said, his voice hesitant. "If we go chasing after those Valarathi, we're running on fumes." Grim nodded. "I know. That's why we're not chasing them. We're going to set a trap." Kara blinked. "A trap? Against ships that can vanish into thin air?" "Exactly," Grim replied, crossing his arms. "They think they've got us on the ropes, but that arrogance will be their downfall. They don't know humans well enough. They don't know how dangerous we are when we're cornered." "Right," Kara muttered, clearly skeptical but willing to follow. "So, what kind of trap are we talking about?" Grim stepped over to the tactical display, pulling up a map of the nearby sector. "We know they're watching us. They've been tracking us this entire time, waiting for the right moment to strike. But if we can lure them into thinking we're helpless, we can turn the tables on them. How? Martinez asked, leaning in closer. Grim pointed to a nearby asteroid field on the map. This. We limp our way toward that field. They'll think we're trying to hide, maybe repair the ship. But what we're really doing is setting up an ambush. We use the asteroids for cover, make them come to us. Kara nodded slowly as she started to piece together the plan. And when they get close, we hit them hard. Exactly, Grim said. We use whatever's left in the tank to take out as many as we can. If we're lucky, we cripple one of their ships and get a closer look at their tech. Martinez swallowed hard. And if we're not lucky, Grim's eyes darkened. Then we go down fighting. But at least we'll know we didn't sit around waiting to die. The crew exchanged glances, their faces set with a grim determination. They knew the risks. They always did. But that was the thing about humans. They didn't back down, even when the odds were against them. Especially when the odds were against them. All right, Kara said, her hands moving over the controls. Setting course for the asteroid field. We'll be there in 20 minutes, assuming we don't fall apart on the way. Good, Grim replied, turning back to the viewport. Let's hope they're watching. The Redemption lurched as its engines sputtered to life, barely holding together as the ship limped forward. The asteroid field loomed in the distance, a chaotic mass of tumbling rocks and debris. It was the perfect place to disappear for a while, to wait for their prey to make the first move. As the ship drew closer to the field, Grim's mind raced with possibilities. The Valarathi were clearly advanced, more so than any other alien species humanity had encountered. But even advanced civilizations had weaknesses. And if there was one thing Grim had learned in his years of fighting across the galaxy, it was that no enemy was invincible. Captain, Kara said after a few minutes, her voice low. I'm picking up faint energy signatures. It's them. They're following us. Grim smiled grimly. Let them. The more, the merrier. The ship slipped into the outer edge of the asteroid field, its hull groaning under the strain of its damaged systems. Grim watched as the asteroids drifted past the viewport, each one a potential shield or a potential threat. They'd have to be careful navigating through this mess, but it was their best shot. Kara, take us deeper into the field. Use the larger asteroids for cover. I want them to think we're hiding, licking our wounds. Aye, sir, Kara replied, her hands moving over the controls. The ship veered between the massive rocks, weaving its way into the heart of the asteroid field. For several tense minutes, nothing happened. The crew held their breath, waiting for the Valarathi to make their move. Grim stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The energy signatures were still there, trailing behind them, growing closer with each passing second. They're coming in, Martinez whispered, his voice barely audible. Closing fast. Grim nodded. Hold steady. Wait for my signal. The tension in the air was palpable as the enemy ships drew closer. Grim could feel the weight of every decision pressing down on him. This was it. Their one chance to strike back, to show the Valarathi that humans weren't easy prey. Now, Grim shouted. The Redemption swung around, its remaining weapons firing in a sudden burst of energy. The asteroids provided the perfect cover, allowing the human ship to strike from unexpected angles. The first Valarathi ship, caught off guard, took the brunt of the attack. Its shields flickered, struggling to absorb the impact. Direct hit, Kara shouted, her voice filled with a mix of surprise and triumph. Their shields are weakening. Keep firing, Grim ordered. Don't let up. The Redemption's guns blazed again, hammering the enemy ship with everything they had left. The Valarathi vessel shuddered under the assault, its sleek hull glowing with the strain. But then, something unexpected happened. The ship shimmered, just like before. But this time, it didn't disappear completely. Instead, it flickered like a faulty hologram, revealing glimpses of something else beneath its surface. Something dark, something alive. Captain, look at that, Kara exclaimed, pointing at the screen. It's not just a ship. It's alive. Grim finished, his voice low. It's a living organism. The Valarathi vessel flickered again, its outer hull splitting apart to reveal a mass of writhing, organic tendrils. The crew stared in horror as the ship, no, the creature, shifted and twisted, adapting to the damage it had taken. "They're not flying ships," Grimm said, his mind racing. "They're piloting living organisms, symbiotic creatures. That's why their ships are so fast, so responsive." Kara's eyes widened. "So, how the hell do we kill something like that?" Grimm's jaw clenched. "We find a weak spot. Every living thing has one." But before they could launch another attack, the other Valarathi ships swooped in, their weapons blazing. The Redemption shook violently as plasma bolts slammed into its shields, sending sparks flying across the bridge. "Shields at 10%, Captain," Martinez shouted over the din. Grimm's mind raced. They couldn't hold out much longer. They had managed to damage one of the Valarathi creatures, but the others were closing in fast. If they didn't act now, they'd be overwhelmed. "Fire everything we have left at the damaged one," Grimm ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "If we can take it down, we might stand a chance." Kara nodded, her fingers moving rapidly over the controls. The Redemption's guns roared to life again, sending a final volley of energy blasts toward the wounded Valarathi creature. The shots tore through its flickering shields, slamming into the organic mass beneath. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sickening shudder, the creature let out a deafening screech, a sound so alien, so unnatural, that it sent chills down the crew's spines. The tendrils writhed violently before the entire mass collapsed in on itself, exploding in a burst of light and organic debris. "Got it," Kara shouted, her voice filled with disbelief. "We took it down," but there was no time to celebrate. The other Valarathi ships closed in, their weapons locking onto the Redemption. "Captain, we've got incoming," Martinez yelled, his hands shaking over the controls. "I don't know if we can take another hit." Grimm's mind raced. They were out of time, out of options, but they had to keep fighting. They had to survive. "Brace for impact," Grimm shouted, gripping the railing as the enemy fire closed in. And then, just as the plasma bolts were about to hit, the ship's systems flickered, and everything went dark. For a moment, Grimm thought they were dead. But then, slowly, the lights returned. The Redemption was still intact. The enemy fire had stopped, and the Valarathi ships were gone. "They've retreated," Kara said, her voice filled with confusion. "But why?" Grimm didn't answer right away. He stared at the empty void, his mind racing. The Valarathi had pulled back, but not because they were beaten. No, this was something else, something far more dangerous. "They're not done with us," Grimm muttered. This was just the beginning, and as the Redemption drifted in the silent void, Captain Grimm Hayes knew one thing for certain. Humanity was about to face a threat unlike anything they had ever encountered before. The silence of space felt heavier now. Every member of the Redemption's crew stood on edge, their hearts still pounding from the last encounter with the Valarathi. Their ship, their organic monstrosities, they were far from ordinary foes. And now, despite the brief respite, Grimm knew they would be back. More dangerous, more calculated. The crew worked frantically to make temporary repairs. Sparks flew as engineers scrambled to patch together systems that had been damaged in the fight. The ship itself felt like a wounded beast limping through space, its lights flickering and engines sputtering. Grimm watched the organized chaos from the bridge, his mind already strategizing their next move. He knew they were running out of time, running on empty. But the Valarathi retreat wasn't a sign of their weakness. It was a calculated pause, an indication that they were regrouping. Kara approached Grimm from her station, wiping sweat from her brow. "Captain, we've stabilized most of the critical systems, but weapons are still offline. Shields are minimal at best. If they come back now, we won't last long." Grimm stared at her for a moment, nodding slowly. "They will come back, Voss, and we'll need to be ready when they do." He glanced at the tactical display, which still showed nothing. No energy signatures, no movement. But his gut told him they were out there, watching. "We need to get ahead of this, Captain," she said, lowering her voice. "We barely survived the last attack. The crew, they're holding together, but they're scared. Hell, I'm scared. These things aren't just advanced. They're beyond anything we've ever faced." Grim clenched his fists. "I know, but fear's not gonna keep us alive. It's what we do with that fear that matters." His voice was steady, calm, as if the chaos around him barely registered. It was the kind of calm that had gotten him and his crew out of 1,000 deadly situations before. But this time, even Grim couldn't be sure they had a way out. Kara exhaled slowly, nodding. "So, what's the play? We can't go toe-to-toe with them again. Not in this condition." Grim turned to her, his eyes hard as steel. "We don't wait for them to come to us. We hit them first, and we hit them where it hurts." Kara blinked in surprise. "Hit them? We don't even know where they are. We're gonna make them show themselves," Grim said, walking over to the main console and pulling up the map of the sector. His fingers moved quickly over the interface, zooming in on a dense nebula not far from their current position. "This is where we'll make our stand. They'll have to follow us in there. And when they do, we'll be ready." Kara squinted at the display. The Vanquish Nebula. That thing is a death trap. No sensors, no comms. We'll be flying blind. "Exactly," Grim said with a grim smile. "They won't be able to track us as easily. And if they want to finish what they started, they'll have to come in after us. That's where we'll make our stand." Kara's expression softened, her skepticism giving way to reluctant agreement. "All right, Captain. I trust you." Grim nodded, then turned to the rest of the bridge crew. "You heard her, people. Set course for the Vanquish Nebula. Get us in there as fast as this old bucket will take us." "Aye, Captain," Martinez called out, and the Redemption's engines sputtered back to life, pushing the ship toward the swirling clouds of the nebula in the distance. As they approached the nebula, the view from the bridge changed dramatically. The stars disappeared, swallowed by the thick, swirling mists of gas and debris. It was like stepping into another world, one where space itself felt claustrophobic, pressing in from all sides. "We're entering the nebula now," Kara said, her hands steady on the controls. "Shields are holding, but we're flying blind. No sensor readings beyond a few hundred meters." "Good," Grim replied, his eyes fixed on the swirling clouds outside. "They'll be just as blind as we are." The ship plunged deeper into the nebula, the swirling colors of gas and dust creating a surreal landscape around them. Grim could feel the tension on the bridge rising as the crew adjusted to the eerie silence. Without sensors, they were flying on instinct alone. Every decision, every maneuver would have to be perfect. "All hands, prepare for engagement," Grim announced over the ship's intercom. "We're in the belly of the beast now. Stay sharp and keep your eyes open." Minutes passed in tense silence, the ship gliding through the nebula like a ghost. Every creak of the hull, every flicker of the lights sent a jolt through the crew's nerves. And then, without warning, it happened. "Contact," Kara shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "I'm picking up faint energy signatures closing in fast." Grim's heart raced. "How many?" "3, no, for ships." "It's them, Captain. The Valarathi are here." Grim's eyes narrowed. "All right, this is it. Keep us moving. Stay in the thick of clouds. We make them come to us." The enemy ships appeared out of the swirling mist, their sleek forms glowing faintly with the strange energy that powered them. But something was different this time. The Valarathi ships weren't attacking right away. They were circling, probing, waiting. "They're not engaging," Kara said, frowning. "What are they waiting for?" Grim didn't answer. His mind was racing, trying to figure out their new tactic. And then it hit him. "They're testing us again," he muttered. "They're trying to see how we react. They know we're weak, so they're toying with us." "Well, what do we do?" Kara asked, her voice filled with urgency. Grim's eyes hardened. "We don't give them the chance. All weapons fire at will." The Redemption's remaining guns roared to life, blasting through the mist toward the circling Valarathi ships. The enemy vessels darted through the clouds, weaving between the energy blasts with an almost predatory grace. "They're too fast," Martinez shouted. "We're not hitting anything." Grim slammed his fist on the console. "Keep firing. Don't let up." The bridge shook violently as the Valarathi returned fire, plasma bolts slamming into the Redemption's shields. Sparks flew from damaged consoles as the ship groaned under the strain. "Shields are failing," Kara yelled, her voice filled with panic. Grim gritted his teeth. "Divert all power to 4 weapons. We're going to punch through their line." The ship surged forward, its guns blazing as it barreled toward the nearest Valarathi ship. But just as they closed the distance, the enemy vessel shimmered and disappeared. "Damn it," Grim shouted. "They're doing it again." Before he could react, another blast rocked the ship, sending the crew tumbling across the bridge. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything went dark. "Captain, we've lost power," Martinez yelled, his voice echoing in the darkness. Grim struggled to his feet, his mind racing. "Get the backup systems online, now." But before they could respond, the darkness was filled with a new sound, a low, guttural growl, like the sound of something ancient and hungry. Grim's blood ran cold as he realized the noise wasn't coming from the ship. It was coming from outside. "Kara," Grim said slowly, his voice barely a whisper. "What the hell is that?" Kara's hands moved over the controls, her face pale. "I don't know. It's not coming from the Valarathi ships. It's something else." Grim's heart pounded in his chest as the growl grew louder, more intense. Whatever it was closing in on them fast. "Captain," Martinez said, his voice shaking. "We need to get out of here, now." But Grim knew it was too late. Whatever was out there, whatever had been lurking in the depths of a nebula, it was coming for them. The ship shuddered violently as something massive slammed into its hull. The lights flickered again, and for a brief moment, Grim saw it, an enormous shadow moving through the mist, its shape impossible to comprehend. It was ancient, primal, and it was hungry. "Captain," Kara screamed as the ship lurched again, systems failing one by one. Grim gripped the railing, his mind racing. There was no way out. No more tricks, no more gambits. This was the end. And as the shadow closed in, its monstrous form swallowing the ship whole, Grim's last thought was a simple one. Humanity would not be forgotten. In the end, they had faced the darkness. And though they hadn't won, they had fought like hell.